This conversation is brought to you ad-free thanks to the generous support of the Howl in the Wilderness Patreon community. To gain access to early release of all episodes, the full podcast archives, and other extras, visit patreon.com/Howl in the Wilderness. Murray Stein, thanks so much once again for joining me on the podcast. It's a great pleasure to have you back.
Very nice to be with you, Brian, once again.
We're here on the occasion of a new edition of your classic book, Jung's Map of the Soul, updated after, 25 some odd years?
Yes, that's right.
What made you want to go back and do some rewriting and additions to this text?
A lot of water has passed under the bridge since that first attempt at describing Jung's Map of the Soul. That was done in the 1990s. And it was an attempt to describe and introduce people to Jung's basic concepts, psychological concepts in their somewhat in their depth, and to the extent that I thought people who are beginners would benefit from, because when you start trying to study Jung's works, it's daunting, and you pick up a volume of the collected works, and after 2 or 3 pages, you put it down.
It's not laid out systematically, programmatically. It's all over the place, and it's hard to wade into that.
So after these years, 30 years approximately since that first book was put together, a lot of new material has come out about Jung, about Jung's life, works that were unpublished at that time have now appeared. For instance, the Red Book, the Black Books. These are very, very important central features of Jung's self-discovery and theorizing. Also, a number of his famous seminars that were given in the 1920s and 30s have been published. Letters have been published, volumes and volumes of letters. So a lot of new material has come out, and I've read a lot of it. I wouldn't say all of it. And I don't think it changes any of the basic features, but it adds a lot of dimensionality to it, and a lot of detail, and a lot of deeper understanding of what Jung's theories, where they come from, and what they relate to, and how they're put together under the surface. So that's what I'm trying to do in this new volume, Jung's Map of the Soul, Deeper Explorations, I call it. You could say it's a new edition or a second edition, or it's maybe a rewriting of what I was trying to do in the first one. I hope it's as good as the first one was and as appealing to people. I think it's better because I've lived another 30 years. I've had a lot of time to think about these things. I've done a lot of teaching, answered a lot of questions, done these kinds of interviews. So a lot of further reflection has gone into this book and was available to me and at my fingertips for the first one.
Mm-hmm. Well, having the opportunity to speak with someone who's been so immersed in Jung's ideas for so many years, in both theory and practice, is a unique opportunity. And so I thought the best use of our time today would to do like a bit of a Jung 101, back to basics, because I was mentioning to you off air that the more that Jung's ideas get populated in social media and popular culture, I think the more chance there is that they'll be distorted, misunderstood, watered down, distilled. And so I'm a big fan of beginner's mind. Okay. So I thought a return to that could be really helpful and a good use of our time. So The first place I want to start is with the map of the soul that's presented in the book is the psyche as a house, which was an image given to Jung through a dream. And that might be a great place to start because I find the image really kind of grounds us in something substantial and relatable. And with Jung's ideas being so complex, I think that's really helpful.
Mhm.
So
Okay,
where
well,
does that image come from? And just if you give us a general kind
sure.
of ground layout of the house.
The dream occurred on a trip that Jung was um, making from New York to Germany in 1909 with Freud. They were on their way back from giving lectures at Clark University. They both received honorary doctorates. Freud is the older figure, the mentor, the teacher. Jung is his student, his disciple. They make this trip together, and on the way back, Jung has this dream of being in a house, and he's on the first floor. Now, in Europe, the first floor is, I think, what we call the second floor in the States, but it's one above the ground. Okay, so you start with ground zero, and then you go up first floor. So he's on the first floor. And he looks around there, and it's very familiar to him. It looks like the house he lived in, that kind of furniture. Jung didn't live in a house with contemporary furnishings, mind you. It was very traditional, old-fashioned dressers and sofas and all that kind of stuff, pictures on the walls. But it looked like it was where he lived, his life today. And then he went down a floor to the ground floor. So that's the entrance floor. And there he found a very different scene. It was decorated in a much older style, medieval, so much simpler, and reminded him perhaps of houses he'd seen in his journeys through Europe, old-fashioned houses, castles, and so on, but it had a medieval quality to it. So it's older. And he thought, well, this is interesting. Up there, it's my time. Down here, it's an older time. I wonder what's in the basement. So he went down into the basement, and there he found a much older style of furnishings and ambiance. That really went back to ancient times, maybe Roman times, Greek times, biblical times, something like that. So maybe a couple of thousand years ago. And in the basement floor, he saw a ring that if you pull up on it, it's a trap door. He pulled it up and he saw that there was a ladder going down into a sub-basement. And being curious and explorative, he's an explorer. That's why I call it a map of the soul. He's an explorer. He likes to find new areas to look into. So he goes down into this sub-basement, and there he finds something really old, archaic, caveman times, bones of prehistoric people. So that's the dream. He took this dream to Freud. He knew Freud wouldn't understand it. Freud would interpret it as a death wish because of the bones in the basement. Oh, you want me dead? That was Freud's neurosis about Jung. So Jung didn't bother going into it in great detail with Freud, but he kept it for himself. And I think it formed for him the model of the psyche. And in the back of his mind, he thinks of the psyche as having levels. Like in the dream, you've got levels in the stories. And you go down deeper, 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 and you get to older levels and finally to a very archaic level at the bottom. So the first level he would call the level of ego consciousness. That's where we live, our daily life, our personal life story and history, our mom and dad, pictures on the walls, contemporary life as we know it and function in it and adapt to it. The next level down, he would call the cultural unconscious. And that is, the formative influences that centuries of cultures have imprinted into the denizens of the culture. You live in a European culture, there's a long background, a religious background, cultural background. Certain attitudes are developed, others are rejected. Jung would say at some point, the West is very extroverted, the East is very introverted. You grew up in an Eastern culture in Japan or China, it's a very different type of cultural background that you have, and that influences your way of thinking, imagining, putting the pieces together, functioning with other people. But it's very unconscious. You don't know it really until you remove yourself from that culture and go into another one. You come from Japan into Switzerland and you realize how different your culture is from this one. So that's the level down. That's the cultural unconscious that has a powerful influence. And then the basement is a still deeper level that would go back to maybe a couple thousand years. Europe was formed by Greek, Roman, biblical religions and mythologies that preceded the medieval time, Christian Europe, but that had an influence on Christianity. So when Jung explores the history of Christianity, he's looking behind the scenes and in deeper levels. Well, you have the Christian story, but then the Egyptian story isn't so different from the Christian, and you can relate the Christian to the Greek myths of Dionysus and so on. And so you have a kind of common background there at that level that influenced later cultures. But then you go down into the lowest level, what he calls the primitive level. People don't like that word very much nowadays, but that's the word he uses. By that he means, Cro-Magnon, cave people, cavemen, which in Switzerland they uncover these bones of cave dwellers on a regular basis in the mountains. They're big and digging around the mountains, and they dig up a bunch of bones, and they can carbon date them. They go, these bones are 10,000 years old, and that's where people were living on the lake. I live near a lake here, Lake Toon, and they discovered some in a cave on the lake. And so Jung was fascinated by that deep history. And the deeper he went, sub-basement, below the sub-basement in his theorizing, he came upon a level that he would call the collective unconscious. So you have consciousness, then you have the personal unconscious, then you have the cultural unconscious, and then you have the deeper cultural unconscious, and below it all, and connecting all cultures worldwide, there is what he called the collective unconscious. That's the source of all cultures. We all come from the same genetic roots. People don't know exactly where, but probably Africa. Homo sapiens, 1 million years old, something like that. And this level, the collective unconscious, is really what fascinated him, and that he explored in many writings and in great detail. The collective unconscious shows itself in mythologies and religions and stories and superstitions. He says you can identify common motifs in all these the fairy tales of the world. There's a hero motif. Joseph Campbell wrote about that, the hero with 1,000 faces. But there's also the great mother. There's the wise old man. There are typical motifs of figures and processes. And what he was intent on trying to identify in his researches and mapping was the the contours of this deepest level. Um, what? How can we find commonalities and parallels between what we dream about from our unconscious or modern unconscious, sitting on top of all these other layers? How can we make a link between what we think and feel and imagine and dream and these very deepest levels of the psyche? So he was intent on finding parallels. So, for instance, when he investigates the dreams and fantasies of Frank Miller, that's a woman, by the way, Frank Miller, her name was Frank, a woman named Frank. She was an American and was traveling in Europe, and she kept a diary. And a psychiatrist got a hold of this diary and published it in one of the psychiatric journals in Switzerland. And Jung picked it up and wrote a book about her fantasies and dreams. And he called it Wandlungen und Symbole der Libido, the transformations and symbols of the libido. And in that book, published in 1913, he identifies images and figures and processes in her, very naive recording of her dreams and ancient mythologies that she had no idea about, no conceivable idea about. Indian mythology, Aboriginal, somewhat American Indian. He brings that into the picture. But he made these connections, and that put him on the trail of what he would call the archetypes of the collective unconscious. These are the typical patterns that pop up spontaneously, not historically through historic distribution or travel or communication on the conscious level, but they just pop up in people's minds. You have a fantasy, you have a daydream, you have a dream, and you can find motifs in it that resemble motifs that you can find in ancient religious texts. And that's what he was really intent on describing in his theory. So you have the level of consciousness where the ego dwells most of the time, but the ego is capable of descending into the other levels and exploring them. So you can become conscious of the other levels through inner work, as we call it, and not lose yourself in them. You always caution people, don't get too fascinated by what you find in these other levels. You have to live at that top level and continue functioning there. But if you do make that trip downwards, you will discover what forms your thinking, your feeling, your desires, your ambitions, your fantasies, your way of thinking. So this is the complexity of the psyche. And he used that dream with the stories, the 5 levels of the house, to kind of organize his thinking about the human psyche this way. And that's the image I use in this book, Deeper Explorations.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so helpful because immediately, my association is a house is a place where I dwell. And it makes me think about Jung's statement that psyche is not in us, but we are in psyche.
That's right.
And that can be a hard thing for us to understand because we think of psyche as mind, and mind exists within the brain. But psyche is something much more inclusive, let's say, with these deeper roots. And so I think just the image of a house is really helpful for us. This might be a good place to get into some of those deeper explorations. I think one of the most misunderstood concepts is that of ego. And I wonder if you could just kind of like unpack that for us, like beginner's mind 101 stuff. What is the ego, and why is it something that we should embrace, not try to get rid of or kill or kick out of the house?
Right. Kick yourself out of the house. Um, a colleague of mine wrote a book about suicide. He called it egocide. Egocide. You want to get rid of the ego in order to transform. So it's part of a transformation process to kind of reduce the ego in favor of other parts of the psyche. But the word ego, we start off with a disadvantage in English because ego isn't an English word. It's a Latin word. And when German was translated into English, the translators adopted the medical way of using Latin terminology to talk about anatomy and medicine. If you try to study the anatomy, all the terms are in Latin. You have to memorize the Latin terms. Why is that? Well, the British, when they were creating medicine, decided to make it sound really, you could say, sophisticated. And anyway, they used Latin terminology. The Germans did not. The German language for medicine is much simpler. They're just ordinary words. So the ego, which you scratch your head, where does that come from, is das Ich. Das Ich, that's all. It's a very simple word. Freud uses it.
Das Ich, the I.
Das Ich, the I. So instead of saying ego, we would say the I. But it doesn't work too well in English to say the I. But that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's when you ask yourself, what is I? I want, I'm going to, I'm doing this, I'm thinking, what is that I? Who is that? What is that? That's a mystery. It's a deep mystery. And meditators work a lot on that, to try to explore. Stand back and look at your I and see who's speaking? Who is that? The I has to do, in its purity, with just consciousness. Jung says it's a center of consciousness. But it identifies with contents of conscious and unconscious material. So your I becomes identified with your name. Can you think of your I without a name? Or what was your name before you were named? That question. So strip your name away from I. Strip your family history away from I. Strip your relationships away from I. Strip all your knowledge away from I. Then you have a pure I. But it tends to be identified, it identifies itself with the name, with the family, with the history, with the culture. And the I, is the center of pleasure, of frustration, of fear. Freud called it the center of anxiety. The I is anxious.
So Freud.
That's right.
Jung, center of consciousness, Freud, center of anxiety.
You have it. But that's also a truth. The I gets afraid. The I falls in love. The I experiences happiness, joy, anger, fear. But these emotions that flood in and take over the I, Jung thought of as possessions. They take possession of you. They take possession of the I. So the task to become conscious is not to get rid of the I, but to get rid of the identifications. To strip away as much as you can and to recover the purity, you could say, of the center of consciousness. It's just like a light at the center of things, without content. And you can think of it as something that you're born with, but it does tend to grow, but it doesn't grow. It grows through a series of changes in the environment, in the inner environment, the physical environment. Your body goes through changes. So the I starts feeling different, with your age, because you identify with your body. But in itself, that I that you are now is the same I that looked at your mommy and wanted her breast. It's the same I.
Mm-hmm.
It knows a lot more now. It's seen a lot more. It's identified itself with a lot more. But in its essence, it's the same I. And Jung says in his theory that the I centers consciousness. So you have contents of consciousness. You have memories, you have bits and pieces of this, learnings and thoughts and perceptions and all of that. Those are the contents of that first floor.
Mm-hmm.
They're the inhabitants, people and so on. And the I is among them and sees them and interacts with them. The contents are the contents can change, and with time they do change. You move out of one house, you get married, you move into another house, you have a different sense of yourself, but the I is continuous throughout your life. So Jung says that I, which is the center of consciousness, is a mirror of, or mirrors, or is a representative of the center of the whole psyche. The psyche also has a center. It isn't just a random collection of stuff that is inherited, but he draws a picture of a circle. He calls it a mandala. And the mandala has different contents to it. Some of them are conscious, some are not, some are very high level, some are very low level, some very physical, some very spiritual. All of that belongs to the mandala. And at the center of the circle, the mandala circle, there is the self, and the ego mirrors the center of the psyche in consciousness. So it's like, you could say the ego is the sun of the self. The ego is also a sun, S-U-N. It's the sun of consciousness. The self is the sun of the universe, or the sun of the solar system. But there's a close relationship between them. And the ego is extremely important for not only functioning in this world, but functioning in your inner world, exploring your inner world. When you go down through the levels, as Jung did in his journey into the unconscious, which you can read in the Red Book, which was published in 2009 after my first attempt at the Map of the Soul, but now it's available. If you read in the Red Book, you notice that the narrator's voice, that's Jung's ego, is present throughout. It doesn't ever disappear. It doesn't identify with other figures except one time. And when the Red Book was translated by my friend and colleague Toshio Kawai into Japanese, he said the thing that astonished him most about the Red Book, as he translated it, was the constant presence of the I, of the ego. Mm. Because in Japanese culture, he says, and other people say, that the ego is not so distinct. It's more vague. It's more we than I.
Right, more of a collective ego.
Yeah, a kind of social ego. We in the West have a very individual ego. Mm. But they also have an ego. Their ego is deeply influenced by their culture, which is a shame-based culture, as Ruth Benedict said, and very social, very, very connected and linked to close people around them. So they observe fields rather than individual things, they say. When we look at a picture, we look at individual things in the picture. first and identify those, and then we see the whole. They see the whole, and then they go to individual things. That's the way they talk about their ego consciousness. So there is a difference, but there is an I there also. And there are preferences to that I. I have a colleague in Japan whose daughter is in school, elementary school, and during the pandemic, they all had to wear masks like we did. And they got so used to the mask that when they were allowed to take off the masks, they hardly recognized each other because in the meantime, they had changed. Children change pretty quickly at that age. And her daughter said, I don't want to take off my mask. I think I look better with my mask on. There's a preference. There's an I that looks in the mirror and sees and likes this better than this for some reason. So that I functions in all cultures. There's always an I, but in some it's more, you could say, hyper developed. We're more aware of individuality, and we stress it. Its importance. It's a great value to us. Be yourself. Don't conform. Don't be a conformist. Go your own way. Find yourself. That isn't so stressed in many cultures. But Hayoko, who's Toshio's father, introduced Jungian psychology to Japan back in the 1960s. And he concluded toward the end of his life, he became very famous as a psychologist and a teacher at Kyoto University. He concluded that what the Japanese needed to do developmentally as a people was to develop more of a sense of ego. They didn't have enough individuality. Because he had lived in the West, he saw it. He saw that you can have too much, but he said the Japanese don't have enough. They need to move in that direction more, and they probably are. The world is moving more in that direction, probably.
Well, and we could probably use a little dose of the collectivist ego.
I think a little more awareness of others than just focused on the I so much, yeah.
Not just awareness of others, but the interconnection, the interdependence between us and other.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think we're afraid of dependence. It's...
dependence is a dirty word, especially in therapy culture.
Yes, that's right. To be dependent. And it's a fearful thing, if you've been in it's one of the reasons relationships break down, because people can't afford to recognize their dependency on the other. So they have to assert themselves against that, afraid to lose themselves. A dependency relationship regress to infancy, something like that, where you are so dependent. But that's a great loss, the ability to tolerate a feeling of dependence and not freak out, is a great...
Actually, you see it as kind of a beautiful thing, that we are tied to others and to the world. And I think, like you mentioned, Joseph Campbell earlier is a great popularizer of Jung's ideas, but so much has been made of his hero's journey that, it created what James Hillman called the heroic ego. Which I think is very dominant in our modern Western culture. And the heroic ego, I think, is the one that is afraid of dependence or sees dependence as a weakness.
Yes, yeah.
But I think this is
Jung's model of stages of development is that the early stage is I wrote a book about this, The Principle of Individuation, it's called. The early stages are stages of separation, where you make a distinction, where the individual makes a distinction between self and other at a very early stage, and a distinction among others. Some are better, some are not so good. You like this one more than that one. So that's the function of consciousness, making distinctions. And also separation, Jung said, of the ego from the unconscious. So it's like you're emerging out of a state of oneness with the unconscious. And I had a teacher who used the image of an island emerging in the ocean. The island gradually rises up above the waves and gets larger, and then you can live on the island, and it becomes an island, separate from other islands. So that is a stage of individuation, a very important one. If you don't do that, you stay lost in a world of fantasy, what we call the puer aeternus. You live a fantasy life that isn't very connected to real world happenings in the social world, in the political world, economic world around you. And in that sense, you stay too connected to the unconscious. So this first half of life is a matter of establishing independence, Jung writes, okay? Second half of life is picking up what has been left behind, the connections that you have severed yourself from, and reconnecting to them, but now in a conscious way. So that's individuation in the second half of life. So you gradually begin to see the oneness of all things, what he calls unus mundus. But that is a slow process. After you have developed a strong enough ego that can, he says, withstand the exposure to what it will experience in the unconscious and in deep relationships with others. You have to be strong to enter into a deep relationship. Otherwise, you're just a child in the relationship.
Right. To enter into deep relationship with another person or with an archetypal power without losing oneself.
Yeah.
So this is a great opportunity, because I want to stay ego-centered on this, I think, because if it is the center of consciousness, of the psyche, let's go deeper into it. What I also wanted to ask you about, like healthy ego function, that strong enough ego.
Yeah.
Now, you write about this in that last chapter of the book where you get into how the theory is put into practice in psychoanalysis. And I think it's really interesting and maybe instructive for people to hear from you about how you go about assessing or diagnosing a strong enough ego, like when somebody is ready to go on that deeper journey. Could you just outline that? Is that possible? Or just give some examples of what indicates a strong enough ego?
Well, I don't do a systematic assessment, but over time, after some sessions, I do get a sense of how much distress and conflict a person's ego can tolerate. Okay, to me, a strong ego can tolerate a lot of conflict and stress. Without breaking down, without becoming defensive, without fragmenting, dissociating. A strong ego can hold it, can hold the tension of what Jung calls the opposites of self, other, is able to enter into dialogue, have differences. And so, in the therapeutic interaction, you can test that by challenging the client. You also get a sense of how they, what we call the transference. If they idealize you too much, that isn't a strong ego. That's an ego looking for a god or something, and wanting to be told what to do. Tell me, what is the program? How can I help me? Jung would say, I have no idea what you should do. Let's look at your dreams. You know what you should do. So you have to find it in yourself. And that's a challenge. And to do that, you need a relatively strong ego. And it gets stronger as you face more conflicts. What strengthens an ego is conflict. If you make life too easy for a child, for instance, don't let them struggle with their homework. Don't let them get bad grades because you can't bear to see them get bad grades or they'll cry. If they don't struggle, they won't get stronger. Ego strength comes through overcoming obstacles. That's the hero's journey. It's necessary in the first half of life to overcome obstacles. When I went to college, I went to a very good high school. It was a public high school in Detroit. Great teachers, good education. But when I got to college, I went to a very high pressure and extremely demanding university, Yale. And the students came from much higher level secondary schools and preparatory schools than I did. So I had never gotten anything but A's in high school, nothing but A's, straight through. I got to college and I wrote a paper for the English class and I failed. I couldn't believe it. So I went and talked to the professor and he told me, well, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, you have to improve it. And I had to work like hell to get my grade back up by the end of the semester, which I could do fairly well. But if I had just said, oh my God, I'm a failure, I can't do it, I'm going to go home and cry on my mother's lap, and not meet the challenge, I would have never been able to become a sophomore. This was freshman year.
Right. So by the time you had that, you were tested in that way in college, you had already, through your upbringing, developed a strong enough ego to withstand that.
Yes, that's right.
That attack.
My parents weren't terribly protective. What Winnicott says about the good enough mother. He was an expert on mother-child relationships. And he came up with this wonderful term, the good enough mother. It's not the perfect mother. It's the mother who can let the child find its own way, can let it fail, can let it suffer to a certain point and then intervenes, but not too soon. Mm-hmm. That's good enough. Perfect. Oh, I want to be a perfect mother. I'm never going to let my child want for anything or need anything that I can't provide and so on. That's not helping the child grow. Of course, you can deprive a child too much. You can be abusive. I'm not suggesting that at all. But to let a child suffer the normal slings and arrows, in school and in relationships and so on, while all the time, taking care that it's not too much, they're not getting bullied or, you have to have some...
The good enough bully,
Yeah, good enough bully.
A little testing, a little fear, a little heroic confrontation.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there is something like very interesting. It's like paradoxical in a way that, these very well-intentioned mothers and parents who want to do better than their parents did, their perception of that anyway, what would be better. And I think because in our culture, there's so much awareness and emphasis on childhood trauma, adverse childhood experiences. And so these like younger parents really want to help their children avoid any of that trauma and kind of come out of childhood unscathed. But in a way, they're depriving their child of the tempering of their sense of self.
Yeah.
Right. So there is something like very interesting and paradoxical about that in our well-intentioned protectiveness of the child, we're actually depriving them of something that is going to serve them later on.
Right. That's right. And then when you come to the second half of life and you turn, from this outer orientation to the inner orientation. This is Jung's program now, so-called first half of life, second half of life. You have to be strong to face the inner world also, because you come across figures in your active imagination and in your dreams that challenge you, scare you. You want to close the door and run away from them. So to face the shadow, as we speak about it in Jungian analysis, means that you kind of face your nightmares. You face your worst fears and your and find in yourself the motivations and the horrible features of people that you see on the outside, terrible people, evil people. You find those in yourself and you face them. And by facing them, they modify, they change. So the inner persecutor, if you face the inner persecutor, can become your friend. If you dialogue with it, if you face it and do the work. So it's very, it's another test of ego strength to be able to face your inner demons as well as the outer world.
To admit those demons, and I mean admit in kind of both the literal and the metaphoric sense, to admit them into the psychic house. Say, okay, you also belong here.
Yes. You're a part of, you live in one of those levels, the basement level. What's down there when you go down and start exploring it. I have a friend and a colleague who did a lot of meditation work, Eastern meditation. And then she went into analysis in her second half of life, and I think in her 50s or 60s. And she discovered things in her basement. She had dreams about going down to the basement, and it was a mess down there. So she was cleaning up the mess. And what she found down there were all the things that she had repressed while doing all this meditation work, which is you kind of overlook or push away all those, you want to be the most virtuous and the best student and all of that.
Or often meditation, it's a process of disidentifying. Not this, not that, not this, not that, right? So there's...
Where does that go?
Yeah, right, yeah.
So she found some interesting things in her basement and through the analysis was able to, as we say, integrate them, that is, release their energy, own them, and embody them in a way that didn't contradict what she had, tremendous things she had achieved in her meditative work, but had buried and neglected for 20 or 30 years, now brought back to the surface and integrated. But that took a lot of courage. And she could have run away from and say, well, analysis isn't for me. I'm just going to stay with my program that I've developed. But she did both. And I think that's the answer to really, you can do both.
Yeah, to tolerate the yes and of life.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a good person, I'm a generous person, I'm a kind person, but man, I can also be, a bit of a devil.
And you are. Yeah. Not only can be, but you are. In your thoughts, in your private feelings, and what we say, the shadow, it's hidden away, not only from other people. What the persona does is hide it from other people. So you present a nice picture, you look very nice,
nice friendly guy.
Nice friend, knowledgeable, wise, friendly. But in your privacy, there's another Brian, who thinks dark thoughts, who has nasty feelings, who's envious, who's jealous, who's greedy. Take the 7 sins that Dante works through in the Purgatorio. You've got them all. So recognize them. Yeah. That doesn't mean to say they're all right, that they're good, but you recognize that they're there. It gives you a better grip on yourself. Self-knowledge is good, more consciousness, and you won't act it out as much, inadvertently or unconsciously. But it gives you a much more complex feeling about your own self, your own personality. It's complex. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think it's like an antidote to inflation, grandiosity, right? It
Yes.
brings humility, and I love the etymological connection between humility and humus, the earth. So, digging into that root cellar of the
Yeah.
psychic house, right? And finding all the creepy crawlies there, you know.
That's
Going, yeah,
right.
they're down there. I'm not just staying on this first floor with its nice tiling and all of that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the shadow is another one of these ideas that is so prevalent. It's really found its way into the mainstream vernacular. Like people everywhere are talking about the shadow, which is kind of amazing. But I think sometimes they have a simplistic view of the shadow work, and that shadow work is about going down in the basement with a flashlight and clearing out all the creepy crawlies, like shooing them out, you know. So I know we don't have a lot of time, but maybe if you can just give some pointers is like, how is the shadow revealed? So if people are interested in exploring their own shadow and they feel they've got a strong enough ego for it, what are some ways that where we can look for the shadow?
Well, there are a number of classic ways, but I can list two or three. Um, One is to ask your wife. Ask somebody who's known you for quite a long time,
Yeah.
and is willing to speak their mind and be honest with you.
And
So
and
that
what's the question? Is it something like, honey, I want you to be like really honest. What is the thing about me that drives you the most crazy, or something like
yeah,
that?
something like that. That you don't realize the shadow's behind your back, so it's hard to get a hold of. You don't see it. So you ask somebody who knows you well, and they'll point out your deficits. And if you have a strong ego, you can take it without becoming defensive and saying, but you know why I did that. No, you take it in and you reflect on it. Take it and use it. That's one way. Another way is to look at the people that you really find offensive in the world around you, maybe your neighbors, brother or sister, or public figures, and ask yourself the qualities that I see there and I find so distasteful and disgusting. Where is that in me? And just spend a little time with that. Where am I like that? Can I find that in myself? Because we project the shadow. We get rid of it by projecting it onto scapegoats. This is an old practice in the Old Testament. There was a goat who took the sins of the village, they drove it into the wilderness, and it cleansed them from all their shadow material. That's what the scapegoating does. You find it in groups a lot. Somebody gets scapegoated, and then everybody else feels much better about themselves because they're the bad guy.
Oh
Well,
yes,
ask
yeah.
yourself, where is that in you? And again, that takes strength, honesty, self-honesty. You do it privately or with your analyst. And then a third place is look at your dreams and what your dreams tell you. Generally, a rule of thumb is, and this doesn't always apply, but a rule of thumb is that when men have dreams about men, that dream man is a shadow figure. When women dream about women, that woman is a shadow figure. The same sex figure is a shadow figure. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind when you look at your dreams. And you will find quite a collection of characters over time. Now, there's also what Jung called the positive shadow. That is some part of yourself that you've either not developed, or you see it in somebody else, but you think, I could never do that, or I could never have that. But you have some of it. So that's a positive shadow, an idealized figure. You want to find where is that in you as well, because that can become a shadow. You can fight the idealized figure. You want to stay away from him. But if you can find that in yourself because you project these various parts of the psyche onto other people. So whenever you have the sense that you're overdoing something, and you're seeing them as too good or too bad, ask yourself, is this possibly a projection? Where can I find that in myself? And over time, you will find that you project much less. You'll see people in a much more naturalistic way. You won't make such strong, extreme judgments about them. You probably still will, because some people represent also a collective shadow. And you see this in politics nowadays. One side projects a collective shadow on the other. And they mirror each other, and they reinforce each other. And what the collective shadow shows, if you study it, is an aspect of the society that's real, that's true. That really is there. They're showing you something that belongs to the society, that is part of the culture. So instead of just, you can vote against it, you can hate it, but realize that it's part of the whole. It belongs to the culture. And if you want to work on that, then it's a long, slow process to work on culture and make culture conscious. Okay.
Yeah.
And don't side too much with the good guys and think that you're on the good side, because there's also bad on your side, and they will tell you about it. The other side will tell you about it.
I've really been hoping that there would be some depth psychologists, some prominent Jungians that would come along and do a kind of psychoanalysis of the left in America, because I think that's one area where there could be a lot of shadow work done, and it would only strengthen the left. And so I'm really hoping that we can come around to that, to own the shadow, to admit it. Therefore, I think becoming more strengthened. Yeah. Well, Murray, this has been really great, and I know we've had a kind of a narrow focus in a way, but I think it's gone deep. If we stick with the sense of I, it goes right down to the center of the earth,
Right.
So this has been wonderful. And I think your book is still one of the best kind of like primers to Jungian thought and concepts. So now it's updated, and it's got a lot more references, even pop cultural references, like the Korean pop group who took the first edition of your book and turned it to a whole kind of album concept, which is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, Brian, well, it was a pleasure talking to you. We'll do it again sometime, huh?
Yeah, thanks so much, Murray. Take care.
Okay.
This conversation is brought to you ad-free thanks to the generous support of the Howl in the Wilderness Patreon community. To gain access to early release of all episodes, the full podcast archives, and other extras, please visit patreon.com/Howl in the Wilderness.